Very good afternoon, everybody. Welcome again to another very special edition of Friday Drinks. Today is a special one because we're actually reviewing the budget, and that's the 2026 budget that was actually presented by the Minister of Finance and Economic Development. That's Professor Mtuli yesterday in Parliament, and we're going to discuss it with a very special guest, Atengwani Coca-Cola, and that is Professor Gift Mugano. Thank you very much, Prof, for coming and for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And the show, as you can see, is sponsored by Coca-Cola. They have been very kind to us. And I think on this special occasion, we do deserve a Coke. And today they actually had the right Coke for me. And that's Coke Zero. Can I tell you a funny anecdote? Mm-hmm. The one time I had a birthday, and because I had so much Coke, my birthday was a Coke Zero.
Wow. Yeah, no, look, that's great. Obviously, they're catering for different tastes and preferences. We have got the original taste, and then there's the Coke Zero, so which is good. It's always a great one having sponsors or corporate support from some of these big players. So if it's last time we were sort of not complaining. Has there been an improvement on the t-shirts?
I think it's better. I think Prof looks appropriate in a Coca-Cola regalia.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
It's just Zonzi Matengwa ne Coke.
No problem.
Now they're just a sponsor of the episode. It's just a coincidence that this one happens to be a budget review. Okay. But this is like our second week with them. Mm-hmm. So there's really, we are so excited to have them on board. All our partners along the way.
Yeah, thank you very much to all our sponsors, especially the corporate sponsors. We really do appreciate the support. It gets us going. And today, the budget. So maybe to just kick off, I know it was extremely dense, and there have been lots and lots of discussions from everybody on all platforms, whether it's WhatsApp, it's social media. I think Professor Mtuli certainly has the town talking. And maybe just at a high level, before we get into the weeds, maybe we can just understand from the Prof, what's your perspective? Just reading the budget, what's your overarching theme that you took from the budget?
No, thank you so much, Tinashe, and it's an honor to be back here. It's an exciting place where we share ideas. Yeah, so this is an anti-people budget, anti-poor budget. And I'm going to say it as it is as we continue to discuss here. But I'm a bit disappointed that the Minister of Finance, in my review of his presentation, he seems to be, I might be wrong, but he seems to be more focused, more worried about revenue generation at the expense of appreciating the impact of measures which he's putting to raise revenue. Most of the measures are self-defeating in the sense that they counter macroeconomic goals of mobilizing savings, mobilizing deposits, financial inclusion. The budget is dampening. The budget is going to be fueling inflation. And we'll go into detail when we discuss further. The major highlight in the budget is the evidence of fiscal pressures on government, evident by failure to pay service providers. I know we'll break it down further again. The rising debt levels, which is very worrying, is showcasing that government with so much appetite to spend beyond its means, beyond its capacity, and in the process, crowding out the private sector, or also killing companies along the way if you fail to pay. So there's no hope. I was expecting a reform-oriented budget. It is not one. It's actually a budget which is actually increasing taxes to raise money. I was expecting a budget which is showcasing genuine insincerity of the budgeting process and budgeting cycle. And I think I want to give stylized facts on this one. For the last 8 years, we've seen the Minister of Finance repeating the same phenomena, where he discards the budget when it comes to utilization or disbursement of funds. In this budget statement which he presented, he showed that Ministry of Transport had already utilized 267% of their budget by September. Ideally, a line ministry or a government department should have used 75% of their budget on the third quarter. But the Ministry of Transport had already utilized 267%. President's office have already utilized 124%. National Housing and Amenities, 161%. Whereas other ministries which are critical, like Industry and Commerce, Foreign Affairs, ICT, have utilized about 23% of their budget. So these ministries are eating into other ministries. And so we are discussing about a budget. And if we come back here again next year, you see similar trends. So why are we doing the budget in the first instance? And the Parliament cannot do anything about it. And no one is doing anything about it. So it's a budget which is not respecting. The last point I want to raise is that in the midterm review, the Minister of Finance indicated that does not need a supplementary budget. And he said that he is going to be spending $7.7 billion end of this year, and his revenue is going to be $7.5 billion. But when you look at the budget which is laying out, which you laid out yesterday, you'll be spending over $8 billion. Who has given him the permission and the approval to spend beyond his limit without a supplementary budget? So it has become like a ceremonial process, as far as I'm concerned. It's not doesn't give seriousness and genuine or sincerity to say government mean what they're saying. I think for now I'll stop here, but I would want us to go later on, of course, breaking down the details.
Into the details.
What
But
does it mean here?
at a top level, before I hand it over to Zia, Professor Mtuli would push back and say, this is my 7th budget that I've presented to our Zimbabwean nation. And when he presented the first budget, that was in 2018, and he would argue that the economy was at that time, I think, about 17 billion US dollars, and now the economy is 52 billion US dollars. So that's 3 times growth over the period that he has presided as Minister of Finance. If he's looking at his scorecard and he's looking at his boss, he's saying, but boss, I've delivered. The economy is 3 times bigger. And this professor is continuously coming on TV, and yet I've been delivering 3 times. What's your response to that?
Okay, that's an interesting question, Tinashe, and I think it's important for people to understand the implication of the rebasing which has been done by government. So the starting point is that let's go to the basics and be factual. Zimstats undertook census, I think 2019, and it showed that our GDP was $21 billion. And if you go back into the national budget of 2020, you would see that the GDP, which was put by the Minister of Finance in Zimbabwe dollar local currency, was $120 trillion. And the exchange rate was 1:6. So if you divide again, you get about $20 billion. This is official information from government. And naturally, when you do a census, that's where you can do your, all those therapies. Benchmarking. Now, in 5 years, our economy has doubled now from 20 billion to 52 billion, more than double. It's crazy, right? That's number one. So
all throughout COVID.
Yes, and we had actually a depression of negative, right? Almost 10% in 2020, in 2021, and in 2024 we had 1.7% growth. We didn't have double-digit growth. So those are the numbers in terms of GDP. But I want to qualify my argument and dismiss this fake or rigged GDP of $52 billion, which I synonymize to putting $1 million in your Excel sheet and say, I'm a millionaire, you pump your chest, but you're very poor like a church mouse. So where we sit here is that in 2018, when the Minister of Finance assumed office as our Minister of Finance, poverty levels in terms of people who are in extreme poverty, it was 29% of the population in extreme poverty. Today, it's 49%. So you see now the challenge. If his economy was working, how do you relate a poverty level of people in extreme poverty hitting 49% up from 29% if the economy was functioning, because they're supposed to be absorbing people who are in poverty and have a better life. Now, let's look at jobs, people in the informal sector. I want to stop there just for purpose of continuity. In 2019, about 76% of the population were employed in the informal sector. And in his National Development Strategy 1, the Minister of Finance set 70% by 2025 as the people who should be employed in the informal sector, which means he would have moved up 6% from the informal sector to formal sector through economic transformation, which means 30% of the population will be working in the formal sector. Now, where we sit, according to Zimstad's report, 87.7% of the population are working in the informal sector. 87%. He missed the target of 70% to be in the formal sector. Now it means 12.3% of the people are now remaining in the formal sector. This is a growing economy to 52 billion, but it can't absorb jobs, right? And 3.5 million young people are unemployed. And Zimstad shows that young people out of our population is 7 million. So half of the young people are jobless. So where are the jobs? You can't have a growing economy which is not creating jobs, which is creating poverty, which is creating dead hospitals, dead education. Standing growth is around 30%, evidence of a misnomer that the economy isn't functioning very well. So anyone who is going to take the $52 billion size of the economy seriously will be very naive.
Okay, thank you very much for that. What I got from that is that the $52 billion economy is paper growth and it's not real. Zia, maybe we can start really at the top level. Could you give us your perspective of this budget and what your thoughts are?
Well, it's interesting that the good prof has taken my sort of line of thinking. I'm a lay person here. He's an expert. So the way I always want to look at it is really around, like what they do in meteorological services about temperatures, right? So they might say the temperature today is 30%, but the real feel is 27. So you even if the number, whatever figure is out there is showing in the thermometer, there's also a certain way that people feel about the weather or the temperatures of the day. Similarly, you'd say, okay, we are seeing all these great numbers, macroeconomic indicators. So inflation is coming down, GDP growth up, the economy is creating more, generating more foreign currency. So all these things are really good. You can't run away from them. But are we feeling it? Are we any richer? Are we so when he's talking about the economic size doubling, for an average person, do they feel a doubling effect in their welfare, in their wealth, or even in terms of their income? So I think there's a huge disconnect between what the macros are showing and what the people are really experiencing. And just
So
before,
it's like the weather report telling us that it's going to snow in Zimbabwe, and then we look out and it's bright and sunny.
sun, and we're just wearing our vests, and you don't need to have a coat and something warmer.
And then the meteorological department still
They're
insists
insisting.
that actually it's snowing.
Exactly. So I think at some point we need to start asking ourselves and say, oh, okay, so where did this extra 24 billion went to? So surely it must have accumulated to some industry or some individuals. Look, it's not a 5% growth over 10 years that you might say, I wasn't feeling. It's difficult to feel it. If a doubling in income or in production, you have to feel it somehow. So maybe you can speak about the distribution of the income, but you can only make that argument if you can say there's a specific segment of the economy that is feeling that that growth. So that's really, for me, that's where the struggle is, that the numbers are not in alignment with the experiences of the people.
I think that's a fair enough comment. And I just want to, because you're the economist and you can help, especially the public. And not that I'm defending Professor Mtuli, but I just want us to be a little pedantic so that we sort of put it out there, because a lot of people are not going to understand these numbers. So I'll still stick with the number 52 billion. To be fair to the professor, he said this is nominal GDP. Our nominal GDP is 52 billion, and last year the nominal GDP is 44 billion. Technically, he might be right. We don't know whether he's right or not. He might be right, because there could be lots and lots of inflation in there. Could you explain to us what's the difference between a nominal GDP and a real GDP?
Okay. So I think you actually gave a hint where you were saying there could be a lots and lots of inflation there, where you have to a nominal GDP is taking into account the prices movement, inflation in particular. A real GDP, we have to deflate, we have to take into account of our inflation. But for me, this issue of nominal and real GDP, it cannot take us to 21 billion. There's no brainer, because
Well, if inflation is actually 50%.
it is not. It is not. It is not. Look, and after all, remember, let's be very real here, right? We are saying the real GDP was 21 billion
In 2020.
2020. So even if there's inflation, you need thousands of inflation percent to double, to multiply it. This is more than 2.5 times. So we have not had that kind of inflation. The highest figure which we had,
It's about 132%.
132%, yeah. And it's not enough to compensate, to jump our GDP from 21 billion. But if you also look at the minister's submission when they were looking at rebasing, they were saying we were including other sectors, and also removing other sectors.
Yeah, that we are now a highly informalized economy. 76% of our economy is now informalized.
Correct. So, but if I want to be more technical, the question is that, just to dismiss this whole issue of 52 billion, now the biggest economy is the manufacturing sector, right? In this current GDP,
Yes.
Followed by, if I'm not mistaken, retail.
Yes.
Mining should be number 3. But we know mining is one of the biggest sectors, which contributes around 15% of GDP before rebasing. So how do you qualify the manufacturing sector, which is dead?
Yeah, at 50% capacity utilization.
Yeah, to be the biggest sector of the economy. So if we are talking to business like now, which are observing, can they focus on manufacturing as the new frontier, which can give them cash flows, which are quite massive? Are there jobs which are created by the manufacturing sector, which you can see? what is our export level in terms of concentration from the manufacturing sector, you would see that 92% of our exports, 70% is mining, 22% is agriculture. So 80%, that's where you have services and manufacturing sector. Why have we not seen transformation, even changes in our exports configuration? Because kind of a manufacturing sector which is not pumping. We've not seen change in our import bill in terms of the concentration. We still import what we're importing, which we can domesticate over $2.5 billion in the manufacturing sector. We still import $2 billion in agriculture, which we can domesticate. Our capacity is still dead. So you cannot have, so those, to me, that's where the issue, the debate dies, to say, I feel, and politically, government, from the political economy, I think they want to showcase that we are making progress to achieve upper middle income. I'm sure you also heard the minister. Actually, I think he actually was misquoted because I don't think he said it. I don't hear him saying it, but I would want to protect him and say he was misquoted to say we are now in upper and middle income. So that issue actually went viral. So the desire to go into upper.
I actually heard him say it. He said we are now GDP per capita is now 3,200 or 3,100, and that puts us as a middle income country. But going into next year, we will become an upper.
So you actually heard him. So I thought he was misquoted. So that is the desire, but we are getting there through backdoor, through the papers, calculations. I think for government, their desire should be to say, we want to have meaningful growth, like what Ranga was saying. Say, people must feel it in their pocket. Economics is very simple. People in Chimani are the best economists. In Mzalaban, they're the best. But they will tell you, is government policy working? They have to check in their pocket. They see it in the schools, in the hospitals, on their roads, in their farms. So if there's no tangible evidence of change on the ground, like what you were saying about the weather, then we're wasting our time in technicalities.
Okay, so I'm going to still stick on the overall overarching macros before we get into the weeds, because I think this is a very important background for everybody to then have a good idea of whether or not we should trust these numbers and what exactly to trust. But something that the minister didn't present, but that came out, and this was the Secretary for Finance, Economic Development, and Investment Promotion, that is George Kwamatanga, who came out with a statement that looked at, government over expenditure or accumulated expenditure arrears, which are, I think, 1.7 billion US dollars. In ZIG, I think it's 45.6 billion ZIG, which is about 1.7 billion. And this was accumulated between the period of 2022 to 2024. And I want us to get into this because, again, it's an overarching theme. But before we do that, let's actually take a break and hear from our friends at Coke.
I was hoping just to get in a hello, but Daniel beat me to it. You know what? He caught the dub, but little did the boy know he was about to catch an L.
Dibs!
Much for coming back, and thank you very much for the people at Coke who are sponsoring this special edition of the budget review with Professor Mugano. And we were still on the macros because I think it's very important for us to get the macros right, because if we get the framework of this particular budget, then we're able to then analyze it. And I think the thing that I got from the prof is to say that Zimstats and the Ministry of Finance did a census of what the economy is, and that was in 2020, and it came out as 21 billion US dollars. So how did we move in 5 years to 52 billion US dollars? So even if it's 52 billion US dollars nominal, on the ground, it does not reflect at all. And that's what we're getting from Zia as well. But what we want to do is, during that same period, and this is between 2022 and 2024, so these are 3 years. In 3 years, we accumulated expenditure arrears, this is the government of Zimbabwe, that amount to 1.7 billion US dollars. So we consumed these goods, but we didn't pay. And all these suppliers and contractors are waiting at Ministry of Finance and hoping to get paid. So the point is, over those periods, we saw government coming out with budgets and telling us the budget deficit was under control. We've seen this before where we had the condonation bill, where 3 years or 4 years after, we're then told, oh, by the way, there are all these arrears and we need Parliament to condone. This time around, they've come and they've now said, well, by the way, all those periods where we said we didn't have a government deficit, it turns out we had a deficit. So first of all, I want to understand just the theory of something like this happening. Is this even possible in other countries where, you know, if you say 1.7 billion over 3 years, that's roughly about 600 or 600 million, you know, that's more than 10% of our budget when you look at our yearly budget. That's huge if you think about it. And we didn't account for it. What say you, Prof?
No, thank you so much. That's why I said in the opening remarks that our budget has become ceremonial. And it is apparent that Parliament, which should provide oversight, is weak and he has no capacity to rein the Minister of Finance to hold him to account, so as other arms of government. What is even more worrying in that letter which you are reading, I read it, is that the PEMSEC of Finance is also blaming line ministries for not adhering to the Public Finance Management Act in terms of utilization and procurement procedures of funds. And so you're asking, does it happen anywhere? So let me just pick Kenya as an example. In Kenya, if you flout the Public Finance Management Act, you have to pay an equivalent of 1 million shillings, which is almost like $8,000, or imprisonment of should be 3 to 5 years, or both. And they don't play. In Zimbabwe, you hear them instituting audits, setting up committees on matters which are killing the economy, playing with people's lives. I am aware of companies which have closed because of these arrears. I am aware, you are also aware of how much jobs are being lost in the seed industry, fertilizer industries, input suppliers, who are suffering because of this incompetence which we are seeing today. So this does not happen in most of our African countries. And remember, this is a repetition of August 2022, where the PEMSEC again issued a similar letter when chickens were being sold at $32 per kg to governments, and they froze our payments up to December, and later on that issue, we did not hear what happened. So this is what dampened investor confidence and also confidence among Zimbabweans to say, do we have a government that is responsible? And that is a big issue. Now, the tragedy of this issue, Tinashe, is that he's talking about the Minister of Finance of all the ministers, talking about $1.7 billion for...
To be clear,
Yeah.
the Minister of Finance did not even allude to this. This was a document that then was supplied as a supplementary document. But in Parliament, if our parliamentarians are not readers and don't go through the documents, they wouldn't know about this.
Correct.
So the Minister of Finance did not present this as far as Parliament is concerned. But this was a document that came as a supplementary document.
Correct. But the point is still the same. It's treasury, after all. This is up to 2024.
Yes.
What about 2025? Where do we stand? And what's happening? And I'm aware that the IMF Staff Monitoring Article 4 in October, they issued a report, and they indicated that some of the about $600 million of non-payments, US dollars, were carried over into 2025. So these are numbers which you see them being thrown around, and you then question to say, how do we get a report which is summarizing arrears up to 2024, as if we are still in 2024? Why don't we take it to September 2025 and see where we stand? So there's no accountability and there's no due sincerity by government to say, let's appraise the market for them to understand where we stand. They do what they want. And this is what kills confidence. Unfortunately, Zimbabweans are very intelligent. They will just look at you and they will not move with the government when it comes to policy implementation because this is not adding up. You just don't want to play with their conscience. They're playing with people's lives.
Wow. Okay. So again, we're just dealing with the macros and just looking at this document and these arrears. Unfortunately, we have to do it in retrospect because we don't know what the deficit actually looks like in 2025. And this makes us really question when Professor Mtuli then says we don't have that much big deficit if, in the last 3 years, we've had this amount of deficits. And from the prof and from the document, what they're saying is, it's the line ministry's problems. But when I look at some of the prioritization of arrears, the categories that they have there, they're things that are pretty much statutory, one would think. So, for example, NASA, PISMAS, Government Mutual Savings Fund. This is pretty statutory. Treasury would know that they have to remit to NASA. Treasury does know that they have to pay PISMAS. They know this is statutory. This is not coming out of the line ministries. This is pretty statutory. And you are a lawyer. Could you help us just understand this? So they haven't paid BEAM. They haven't paid war vets. They haven't paid pension fund. They haven't paid NASA. They haven't paid PISMAS. They haven't paid the Employee Mutual Savings Fund. And a lot of these are statutory payments. Why wouldn't that be happening, especially if we're in a growing economy?
So that's where the problem is, right? That there's this disconnect between what the numbers are showing and what's really happening. Surely a growing economy would not have problems of non-payment of suppliers to this extent. And I think that's where, even in terms of the policy sort of direction, people start questioning what exactly is happening, because they're talking of fiscal discipline. But the fiscal discipline is not entirely convincing or honest, in the sense that they're incurring costs, but they're not paying them. So I don't know if the discipline is really around.
And they cannot say that they didn't know they were incurring these costs, because a lot of these costs are statutory.
Yeah,
category one.
But even the ones that are not statutory, I mean, it's not like even the ministries and government departments can just accumulate some cost without knowing about it. They certainly know. And if there was a system that was the checks and balances, to say, I mean, just look at it at a corporate level. So you are a big corporate with different departments. People don't just go out and start spending without approval, because anyway, you still have to make the payment. And even the supplier, the one who is supplying you that product, they need to be sure that they'll be paid at some point. And it has to be known that, the system in which payments can be made within an organization has to be clear, so that even outsiders know that this particular officer has got, he has got the power, or they are allowed to make this kind of expenditures. So it's really, so on one side they are presenting this picture of fiscal discipline. On the other way, they are actually doing something very, very dangerous, which is to be accumulating costs and not paying people. And, even the solutions that they then come up with around, okay, how do we deal with these arrears that have accumulated over time? And the real sad things really is around, okay, if you look at it and say this has been in the past, but going forward there's an attempt to try and do things differently, then you'd say, okay, maybe it means going forward things will be happening they will take a different course. But it seems to be a way of life. And then it puts into question the numbers. So if these are...
the credibility of the numbers.
credibility of the numbers. So we are hearing this now, that in the past 3 years, there's been this accumulation. And that number was not there in all the numbers that we're looking at, the budgets. So how credible are the 2025, 2026 numbers?
Well, again, and Prof, you can help us, because we're trying to make sense of this, is the credibility of these numbers. But we look at category 3, they have capital expenditure and other areas. And the largest of which, 700,000, is dam construction and water supply projects. We thought this was budgeted already. We thought this was accounted for already. And we can't say the problem is line ministries. This is 700 million that we owe to dam construction and water supplies. And road development, it's about 222 million. Surely we knew. We saw the guys that were developing these roads, these dams, and we thought it was budgeted for. Turns out it wasn't budgeted for. How did we miss 700 million? Could you just help us understand?
It's very difficult to explain. Particularly, I recall when I listened to the PEMSEC of Finance this year, he was at ZCon. And he said that we've paid everyone. I think we are remaining with $100 million for the roads. So, now you see, he's writing a letter which is showing more than what he said he's paid. So he should be the one actually who is helping us to understand. But again, credibility issues comes into play. And again, to say $700 million spent on dams. Which dams?
Kunji,
yes,
number, and water supply projects.
Correct, but where are the dams? Where's the evidence? Because $700 million, you can put a power station. It's a lot of money. Just putting a dam, putting walls, and you let water accumulate. So, it then question accountability and corruption, saying we should be actually in the news, making news headlines. The Grand Renaissance Dam, the Ethiopian one, which made headlines, it was using almost like $1 billion and it's going to be the biggest dam in Africa, which will be producing power. And they will have excess of $1 billion in terms of exports. So our dams are not making headlines, but they are spending $700 million. Again, tells you that there is a lot of corruption taking place there. That's why this money was being used. So the point which you are raising, Tinashe, is very fundamental. There's no way this amount of money is being used by line ministries when the Minister of Finance is not aware. If I were him, I would resign because he's not in control.
And to be fair, the 700 million is not what was used for the dams. The 700 million is the unaccounted for that was spent.
Exactly.
And they then realized
there's more. There's more which was used.
There's more that was used, and the 700 million.
And the chief of treasury is not aware of that. So what is he doing?
Yeah.
If I were him, I would resign because he's not in control. So, but in reality, he is aware. I think you should bring him here and say, but Chief, how did this went through under your nose? He actually owes us an explanation.
I think so. And this is our plea to the PEMSEC and the Professor Mtuli to say, how is it possible that 700 million for dams? Because we can count the number of dams. They're not more than 5 that we've seen.
The only one which is magnificent is the Kunji,
right,
which was built during the first dispensation.
Yes.
We have not heard of
any major dam construction. So how is it possible that we spent 700 million that we was not accounted for and is now in arrears? How is that possible? And then input support scheme. I suppose this is the presidential Fumbuza.
And the command.
Well, no, it was no longer command because this is 2022 to 2024. So it's Fumbuza. And it's 380 million. That is unaccounted for. So there is Fumbuza where we know because this is where Treasury would know that we've actually spent money on Vovoza, but turns out we spent more than we knew. And the amount of money we spent more than we knew is 380 million. Gentlemen.
Well, what's worrying and even scary for me is, so when I was looking at this document and say, okay, fine, what are we saying? You're saying ministries and departments are transacting outside of the public finance management system. We have got weak control and monitoring systems, over-contracting, misalignment of budget, and cash release. What is that? What's happening? Is what? I mean, is there a system there? It's everything that can go wrong.
Yeah. Murphy's Law, everything that goes wrong, anything that can go wrong, goes wrong.
Goes wrong. And it's really, so, and when you say such amounts are unaccounted for.
Yeah, 700 million for
Yes,
them.
it's unaccounted for. Surely it must be, there must be commotion within the corridors to say, no, we need to make an effort to account for them. Is it because of discipline issues? Is it how the bureaucrats work in general? Is there a system that say anyone can just spend without budget? And when that happens, what happens to so it's really problematic in the sense that it means there's a parallel structure. It looks like there's a parallel structure of spending. I don't know if there's a parallel structure for revenue generation.
Maybe to buttress what I said. Now, we spent unaccounted for $380 million
on just the presidential inputs.
unaccounted for, which means there is a significant share which was accounted for. So let's deal with the unaccounted for. 380 divided by 3, 2022, 20, up to 20.
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. So we're talking about
120, 125.
125 million on inputs. Every year we spend about $500 million on cereals, right? But we are spending this money. Where are the inputs? Where are we importing these cereals? We spend close to 200 million, 250 on soybean. But from foods I include soybean and maize, right? So how do you link that? Because if we should be having we should be exporting cereals. We should be exporting because there's a lot of utilization of inputs in our system, in our economy. Just last year, we spent $606 million of imports on maize alone. But last year is 2024, and we're at the season of 2023, which those inputs were used. So I'm raising a point that we need to also to look at these numbers with intended output goals to say what were the intended goals is to foster food security. Yeah. So if we look at the numbers in isolation with the target goals to say we need to match, I would be so happy if there's this situation, but we have headache of keeping our grains to say where do we keep our grains. Now our silos are empty. Even now we're importing. The Minister of Agriculture.
Yeah, even grain.
Put a statutory instrument 87 to say we are not going to be allowing imports. But yet to relax it because millers rain everywhere. They cannot get the grains. So we are doing fun games with people's lives. Yeah.
So we're saying all this because it gives us a context in which we look at 2025 and 2026 budget where we sort of question the credibility of the budget that was actually presented by Professor Mtuli when you have these sort of arrears. I mean, to buttress what you guys are saying, we need to keep in mind that these are the verified invoices.
Yeah.
Where Ministry of Finance themselves have now confirmed that yes, indeed, we owe so and so because they were actually involved in dam construction. Yeah. Whether or not we can't see the dams, it's another matter. But these are verified invoices, and for dam construction and water supply projects, it's $700 million.
Did they go through tender? Because I think if the tendering process was working well, surely it could have been accounted for from day one.
This is the unaccounted for. So there's amounts that were accounted for. This is beyond that. So let's suppose, because I think the unaccounted for can't be 700 million. So I assume that we spent $1 billion in dam construction.
Yeah.
I'm making very
Yeah. So Tinashe, I'm also trying to get, in a sense, to say when this kind of official documents comes out, what is the response of ZAC, Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission? Because they should be now at work to say, we're interested in this matter. So I'm following up a question which you've raised to say, is it normal in any country? If it was South Africa, the equivalent of ZAC would have done its work and made a statement to say, we are on this matter.
Yeah.
So when I'm raising this, it's a system issue. Because why are all the state apparatus dead when this kind of
It's
alarming evidence of abuse of resources, rather, if I want to put it that way?
It's certainly a big worry, and we hope that the authorities will look at it, clearly, and they also look at 2025 and what's actually happening there, and going forward, that we won't have these, because perpetually we've had legacy debt, which was again another big issue. We've had condonation bills, which again was a big issue, and now we have these expenditure arrears, which is a big issue because $1.7 billion is a lot of money, and we can clearly see that our problem is an expenditure problem. That's the Zimbabwean problem, perpetual. But now let's look at the impact of this. So if you've got $1.7 billion, before it was just accounted as, we owe you, but now it's been formalized, and the PEMSEC has said they're going to put this in some sort of instrument, and this instrument, because 98% of this is actually US dollars, this instrument now will have to come onto our balance sheet as far as money supply is concerned. From a very basic perspective, it means that our money stock just increases, but there's no actual cash. We've already spent this cash. Your thoughts on that? And the fact that Treasury is saying that they're going to, 5 years, they're going to pay this over a period of 5 years. Yeah. But these instruments will now be in our financial system.
Okay, so I see a replay of 2013, 2018, when the then Minister of Finance, Comrade Chinamasa, was issuing treasury bills to similar fashion of non-payment of services. When we had the GNU, Honorable BT used what we eat, what we kill, and we get out of GNU without any debt, domestic debt rather. We had public debt, external debt, but we didn't have domestic debt because the domestic debt had been cleared by inflation before dollarization, right? So actually there was a surplus of $250 million at the end of GNU. Now, Honorable Chinamasa became the Minister of Finance and began to create electronic money through treasury bills. So on 20 February 2019, our domestic debt was now $9.4 billion, created by these treasury bills. And so we then began to have a system called RTGS as currency. So if I link that development with today's development, basically, Minister of Finance is aiding in the creation of fictitious US dollars in our balance sheet, in our banking system. So obviously, if you look at the breakdown of our total money supply, you would see that the non-negotiable instruments were quite insignificant in terms of total share. Now they will be rising up. And the bad thing now is that when government say we are going to be, these are going to be discounted, it means they're already creating money.
Well, they say they are non-tradable, but we know.
But they can buy back.
Yeah, they will buy back. So you can't trade them. They will buy back, and they would buy back at an auction discount rate, or whatever the auction.
Whichever case it is, they're creating money supply.
Yes. And
the hard US dollars, the ratio of the available hard US dollars vis-a-vis would dwindle.
Yeah, it's a big worry. Okay, we'll maybe, Zia, just give us a minute of your perspective, because then we can then move on in the next segment on this increase in money supply because of this.
it's a perpetual cycle, as the professor had said, and it's going to then just create the same problem that we have. So they know that they've created money supply, and what are they going to do? It means maybe in the next phase, they try to control that by actually not paying again. You know, and we seem not to come out of that vicious cycle.
Vicious cycle. Well, you heard it first, yeah. Vicious cycle. It's very clear that our problem is an expenditure problem, and in the next segment,
I think it's more a discipline problem.
discipline. Okay,
Because
we'll get
if
into
you
that, yeah.
were going to, if it was budgeted expenditure, then it wasn't going to be a problem.
Yeah.
It's
It's
expenditure.
unbudgeted expenditure.
Yes, then that becomes a discipline problem.
Okay.
But Tinashe, maybe before you go, how do you owe schools BIM, right? The basic access education module, $80 million, which is in that breakdown. And the schools have to function. So you took 3 years holding their money, and then you want to extend again another 5 years, which means 8 years. Are we going to have a school at the end of 8 years cycle?
Well, they're
Same
saying
applies
it's-
to all veterans. Same applies to contractors. You have borrowed the money from the bank to do some work. You've put your assets, and you were holding on for the last 3 years, and now someone comes back. You know, I'm trying to look at the moral side of it. Say, because we are discussing even money supply levels, but let's look at the moral side. What are we doing? What are we doing to ourselves? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big worry. Join us in the next segment, and we again go into the weeds of the budget. So this was just really to give color and context in which you can then analyze the numbers, whether you believe them or not. But these are the real effects of the budget, and we're hoping that now we can get into the weeds in the next segment. So join us in the next segment. Cheers.
I was hoping just to get in a hello, but Daniel beat me to it. You know what, he caught the dub, but little did the boy know he was about to catch an L.
Dibs.
Thank you very much for joining us. This is a special edition of Friday Drinks, sponsored by Coke, and we're here. I'm having my second Coke Zero. I love it. I love it to death. It's something that I carry with me all the time. I actually like the one in the bottle and not the one in the can. I don't know what you guys think. The different Cokes. Which one do you prefer?
It's the same.
The bottle one, eh?
The same in the can. What is important is the drink.
So you know, with beverage companies, you're selling, the product is actually the packaging.
Yes.
So this packaging, the can says something about the social status or the economic status.
Oh, really?
Exactly. So
So what is the bottle? What does the bottle say
So
about it?
the returnable glass bottle is for the mass market. It's for, you know, it's mostly the product. That's why you are holding on to your bottle. So theoretically, you can actually go with your bottle and get a refill, and then you close it. Like theoretically.
Okay.
So the same contents. So if it's 300 mils,
But why does it taste differently? I always think that the bottle one tastes differently.
Well,
Sharon, is it true what these guys are telling me? That it's actually the same content?
Yes, it is.
it is.
Really?
Yeah. So look, it's
So maybe
cool.
it's just playing with my psychology.
Yeah, look, it just means that you're old school. But by the way, I also like when I'm traveling, I prefer mine in the bottle as well. Like you get to some business center down there in the rurals, right?
Yeah.
Unosvika pashop ndoda Coke bottle inenge ice cold.
Exactly.
Yeah, but also look, this one says I think in a
You've
small way,
arrived.
you've made it.
Okay. All right. I've
Olimpinga.
arrived. Okay, gentlemen, we want to get into the weeds. So the first thing is I want to color the discussion around, again, expenditure, but we'll get into the weeds. But if we look at 2024, when they were preparing the 2025 budget, and I just look at the ZIG amount, they said that they were, in terms of revenue, they were going to raise 270 billion ZIG in terms of revenue in the year. Well, they didn't get that number. I think we're expecting 215, right? So there's already a gap. And they attribute that mismatch to exchange rate, that they had forecasted the exchange rate was going to be at 36, but actually it's at 26. But from a statutory perspective, you gave the ministries, you gave everybody, the budget that was passed was you can spend up to 270 billion, right? Didn't say what the exchange rate is, it didn't say anything, it just said you can spend up to 270. But unfortunately, your revenue is only 215. What's going to happen? Because the ministries were told to spend that money.
Yeah, well, they have not been allowed to spend that money. If you look at the budget in terms of the utilization of the budget, quite a number of ministries, most of them by 3rd September, they are below 50%. Ideally, because we're in the third quarter, they should have spent 75% of their budget if the minister was dispersing the funds according to priority areas and time years disbursement. In a striking fashion, you would see that the Ministry of Industry, for example, and I will mention it deliberately because it's a critical ministry, you must foster production. They spent 23% of their allocated funds. Likewise, foreign affairs around 23%, ICT around the same. So already the ministries, even if they wanted to spend 100% of their budget, it is not within their control. Even Ministry of Health, where we feel that they have pressures to spend money because of the health, importance of the health sector, they spend around 45% against an ideal utilization of 35%. So the Ministry of Finance already put a system in their disbursement where they are restricting payments. And these ministries, by the end of the year, they want to spend 50% of their budget. But there are some ministries which are overspending, as I said, transport, they've spent 267% by third quarter. So there's these political or institutions which are supporting political programs spend more money, they have more political leverage than other economic ministries which are just doing their work.
Okay, so political ministries have better leverage than those who are not political ministries. Would you agree with that assertion?
Well, it's a fact, right? The prof here is speaking to the facts on the ground, but I'm just worried, because you'd say, okay, the same. I don't know whether is it because of discipline or maybe it's actually an allocation sort of problem, where even if these ones would want to spend more, the funds are not being allocated.
Well, they're just not there. The funds are just not there.
They're just not there. And so if that is the case, so how do we then end up with sort of an accounted for spending? Because there are some ministries where they can't spend more because the funds are not there. Who are these ministries that are allowed to spend way be?
Dam construction.
You see,
The roads.
so that's a problem,
big worry.
right?
Yeah.
It's a big worry.
Okay, so then we take it to revenue generation and a government way, the fiscal way of raising money is through taxation. And I think of all the budgets that I've ever seen, this was the most egregious as far as increase in taxation is concerned.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that Mthuli has been consistent with, Professor Mthuli has been consistent with for the last 7 years that he has produced the budget, is taxation.
Yeah.
When we were growing up, we knew that the Ministry of Finance is going to reduce tax bans and bonus taxes. And that was, there was always pomp and fanfare around November. When we started working, we would look forward to it. But unfortunately, for the last 7 years, we know that at any budget presentation, it's going to be an increase in tax. But this one was the most egregious. And before I get into the details of the tax, and I think we'll get to some sort of details, but I just want to understand, from a philosophical and theoretical perspective, an economy that's growing. So yes, we now can confidently doubt the $52 or $44 billion economy, but one could argue that it's a growing economy, or is it? But the level of taxation and the level of expenditure, it's not congruent with a growing economy.
Yeah.
But theoretically, is it possible to grow an economy through higher taxes?
No, thank you so much. It is not possible to grow an economy through higher taxes. Let's look at the impact of the 2% tax, just to explain my point. In 2018, going backwards, the size of the informal sector was 60% of the economy. But when the Minister of Finance introduced the 2% tax, what they call the IMTT, we've seen a lot of economic agents moving away from platforms which are formal in terms of payment to cash payments. Now we have an informal sector or informal transactions dominating the payment system. And so already we are regressing in terms of growth. People are already avoiding that. So tax regime, other countries like Mauritius, South Africa, their average tax as a share of GDP is around 15%. Ours is now 15% because we have rigged our GDP. Yeah. But before it was rigged, the contribution of total tax as a share of GDP was 25%. So 1/4 for the size of the economy was synonymous with our taxes. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So an investor who is looking for investments before the rebasing will not come to Zimbabwe when your tax contribution to GDP is...
Okay, so I want to just push you hard on just the theoretical perspective, because maybe Prof has some sort of magic wand that we are not seeing, and let's give him that grace. Is there a scenario in all theory where taxing more results in economic growth?
So if you tax more, you kill demand. And if you look at the numbers of decline in aggregate demand on an annual basis, we're talking about 33%. If you have no demand, you have no growth. Right? So Zimbabwe, if you talk to people, they say, Mara is kutenderera. And it's a combination of factors, of course, non-payment of service providers, but also when you are taxing more, you are leaving people without any money. How do you tax a person who is earning $300? And you want that person to go to the shop and buy. And you see, when you look at our production capacity, they remain stuck at around 56%, 57%. So an economy that is characterized with a lot of taxes will not grow. Look at the VAT they've just added. It is net effect of increasing prices, so it slows down demand. The most effective way of growing an economy is to lower the taxes, improve the efficiency and the administration of the tax.
So the supply side.
Supply side, yeah.
Okay, so tax kills demand, but it also constricts the supply side as well.
Correct. It also increases the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
Because now, if you look at the impact of 2%, it's so massive that to an extent that if the value chain is long, it can go up to 30% contribution to the cost build-up of a particular commodity. And minimum, from my research, is 17% contribution to the cost of the product. So that's massive.
So then why would Professor Mthuli Ncube, who's an economics professor, he obviously understands the theory, why is he continuously increasing taxes? He has been. For the last 7 years, if you look at just the number of taxes that he has increased, I think this is the most we've ever seen in the history of this nation. Why is he continuously doing so?
No, I think from my initial remarks, my opening remarks, I said that the minister seems to be a fiscal mathematician. And I think the danger which we have, he did a PhD in financial mathematics. So he is focusing more on numbers than the impact of what he's doing. And you can see it's so apparent. 2% tax. the cash withdrawal levy. He look at the numbers. It tells you that we are withdrawing $300 million a month, more than $300 million a month. So
Tax it.
So he sees how much it's taking. So I think it's a philosophical approach. It's this approach that I need money. I want to balance the budget, but there is a depth of analysis to say what are the implications. I'll give you another example as I round up my submission. The beef value chain, right? He introduced VAT. And do you know how much he's losing? We did some study per year. 25 million minimum, direct from the established abattoirs, because the market is just becoming informal. It's a clear demonstration for your first question to say, does it grow the economy? We used to have 80% formalized beef value chain. Now, nyama dzakura pasi pemiti, and my abattoir has been turned into killing, not for the normal traditional work they should do. And he's missed out about 25 million minimum when he's targeted to get more. So some of these policy measures are self-defeating. I actually put it on my X to say, Minister of Finance are losing this money. And the numbers of how much is being killed per year is there in the Minister of Agriculture in terms of the number of cows. Then you can estimate how much is losing. So it's a philosophical approach that he must try to get money everywhere. You saw people betting, you see. He's there, he's taking money. So it can't be a country where you have someone who is even hunting mortuaries to say, if there's a dead person here, I should put some tax here. And I take betting as a way of people of living now because of the lack of jobs. Go there during the day, people are betting, and you are in there again to take money. So, yeah, it's worrying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the biblical Zacchaeus, the taxman, what's your take on just the philosophical understanding of Prof. Ntuli believing that tax or there's some sort of correlation between tax and economic growth? Because he's telling us that the economy has been growing, and he's been, touting this idea of just tax, and the number of taxes are just increasing by the year. If you were to give him some sort of grace and just understand his theory, what do you think is happening? Or as the good professor has said, this guy is just looking at just balancing his books. He's not necessarily interested in the impact, in cause and effect of his policies.
Well, I will certainly agree with that his approach is really about raising revenue. So it's around increasing the tax rate on certain lines. But if he feels that he can't do that anymore, he creates another line. And the last example that Prof has given really is a bit desperate, like betting tax and even the 15% digital tax. We don't have a thriving sort of digital economy as it were. So you are trying to, instead of maybe trying to come up with incentives to foster growth in that space, what are you getting? You are getting that sector or subsector being taxed. So what basically it means is that there's not going to be any growth there. And I think what has happened over the years, or the 7 years that you're making reference to, is we have seen the economy becoming more and more informal. And I would say a significant part of that is because of the overtaxation. And even the tax on the cash withdrawals and things like that. I mean, as a business or as economic players, maybe you need to start asking questions around, does it make sense to be depositing money? Because every time that I'm trying to withdraw it, I have to pay up to 3% of that as tax. I mean, on US dollars, you just lose 3% of your US dollar to a tax because you are withdrawing it. Is this going to foster more formalization or informality? So the cake is becoming smaller and smaller, and I think a bigger part of that is the economy is informalizing, and I think there's a desperate effort to try and bring back more players into the formal sector, but you don't do that by overtaxing them. If anything, you are creating a more and a sort of broader underground economy, and the burden is really more on the formal businesses if you look at it that way, because you can never get to the cash that is CSO or whatever, the informal ventures that people are running. So there's a lot of, I think what I see is really desperation. And if anything, if we just continue on this path, the formal sector is going to suffer even more.
Okay, so that's very clear that if you look at the 7-year period that we've had in Tuli, the economy has actually informalized. Even
More,
according to
yeah.
his own numbers. I mean, 76% informalization. That's the highest in the world.
Yeah.
But so let me look at it again from his perspective, because I'm trying to really figure out what he's trying to do. What if he argues that actually the economy has grown, but there are people who are not paying their fair share? And all I'm just doing is playing sheriff, where I'm just going after people who are not paying their fair share. People who, for whatever reason, and whatever the past has been, have avoided or evaded tax. And all I'm just trying to do is to get them, especially because now the economy is informalized, the ways and means in which we were raising tax in the dollarized era, for example, which was through corporate tax and VAT, those means are now very much constricted. So I have to find ways and innovative ways in which I can get tax from a highly informalized economy. So I'm not necessarily killing the economy, but what I'm just trying to do is to just respond to the nature of this modern economy, which is highly informalized. What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, I think the evidence which is there to that, Tinashe, is that the World Bank done a survey on the size and on the informal sector. I'm sure you're aware about the Fiscal report. And evidence shows that we have over 6 million people in the informal sector. And now, where I want to talk about the relevance of taxation now is that those people, they make around $500 a month in terms of sales, not a profit. Yeah, so people in the informal sector are struggling. You know, it's not the ideal market for them. They rather want jobs. You know, how do you expect someone is selling the pavements in the booty, and the Minister of Finance doesn't get it? He wants to come with the fiscalization in the pavements, but there's no electricity, there's no infrastructure, so he's too desperate, and he really need to talk to himself. Right, listen to himself to say, what I'm doing, is it making sense? So the argument to say I want to follow up the informal sector is no brainer. What did he collect last year when presenting tax? 48 million, the whole economy. I'm talking about the 80% of the economy. He only collected 48 million. Is in his budget. It's clear testimony that there's nothing there. You are chasing people. It's like a game of monkey and baboon running over the trees. Right. So the real issue, we want to grow the economy. Right? And what Ziva said is very, very striking, that the casualty is the formal sector, because the burden now, in terms of compliance and enforcement, rest is easy with the formal sector. You can't enforce this. So hakuna chiriko in formal sector. And those people are just there as temporary, but now become permanent because of situation. If you create a job today, there won't be anyone there. So he can't justify that.
Okay. So theoretically, what I'm getting from you, and maybe this is our advice to Treasury and particularly to Professor Mtuli, is that if he were to step back and he were to look at his tax regime and his tax system, is that perhaps you're going after the wrong thing.
Correct.
If you're chasing after the informal sector, and we already know that there's nothing there, but even if you believe there's something there, but maybe if you really, your policy was designed towards formalization of the economy, then you're inviting the informal sector to come back into the formal sector, and that's where you can meet them with your taxes.
Correct.
But if you're inhibiting, and if your tax regime is catastrophic for the formal sector, then more and more people are just going to informalize.
Exactly.
And we already know it's tough and it's hard for you to get that money in the informalized sector. A very good case in point is IMTT.
Correct.
That IMTT, when you first introduced it, he raised up to about 11% of his taxation on that.
16%.
Yeah, 16%. And then now it came down to, less than 4%.
Correct.
And now it's now clubbed. It doesn't even have its own line item anymore because it's not raising anything
for
anymore.
distance. But maybe as additional advice to the Minister of Finance, if you want to tax the informal sector or to expand its fiscal space, he must scrape the VAT threshold of 25,000. Why does he want to set a threshold? His purse is very empty. He should just simply say, formal sector, trade with anybody, but collect my VAT. Because the one who charges, who collects, is the one who sells. Right?
Yeah.
So now he put a threshold of $25,000. If you go to Zimbabwe and say, I want to get VAT, they will ask for 25,000 from a person who is selling $500 a month. That's crazy. So if you say sell to anyone, but you collect on my behalf, right? It then takes away already tax evasion, which is already happening. Because now if I am a Mugano Holdings and I have my company and there's a buyer who is giving me cash every day, all right, and there's no VAT certificate, what am I going to do? I will give them prices without VAT. So again, the formal sector are also now evading taxes because they want to sell at the end of the day. And these guys in the informal sector pays cash. In their numbers, it makes sense for one company. So he should scrape that threshold. It doesn't add value for the purpose of its efforts to collect tax.
Again, we look at the formal sector, and the big worry there in the formal sector is introduced a tax on, or a royalty on gold deliveries above 2,500, which will now be, the royalties will increase from 5% to 10%. This is the highest in the world. The only country that's sort of, I think the threshold in Mali, where it's in new exploration or new gold discovered, that's when 10% hits. But if it's the old, then I think it's still 5%. But this is the first in the world where gold royalties would be 10%. If you're generous, you would say that he's introduced a tax on profit. But unfortunately, royalty is not on profit. Royalty is on revenue.
Correct.
Now, if you're trying to encourage formalization of the economy, this is one bad way of going about it. And you're more likely to see people, especially the macroeconomics, now going to the smugglers and selling there, because 10% is huge, especially in the gold industry. But when you look at even all the other commodities, lithium, chrome is introduced 10% tax on that, and it's on royalties again. Zia, can you give us an analysis, especially on gold? Why would he do this? Why wouldn't he just tax maybe profit? I could maybe understand if it was profit, but he's taxing, revenue at royalty level, 10%, highest in the world. Why would you, as a Mkorokoza, as a rational Korokoza, why would you take your gold deliveries to Fidelity?
And even as a rational corporate gold miner, surely as you sit around in the boardroom, you need to think of ways of, sort of defending your balance sheet. Why would you be so keen to just openly pay 10% as royalties? So it's okay, like the example that you've given of the macroeconomics, they are already informal. But the real worry, like we've already shown, is the formal sector is also going to, you're creating an incentive for them to informalize. That's all. So, they'll look at them, at the production and say, okay, do we need to push all these, as through the formal channels and pay 10% on it, or maybe you need to be creative and reduce the burden. Again, it doesn't really sit well with the mantra around Zimbabwe is open for business. So you want to go out there and attracting investment into the gold sector. It's a very capital intensive area. So if anything, you want to be giving them incentives. And how do you then go out there and make a case that come and invest, say 10 million or 20 million, but as soon as you start generating something, I'm taking 10% right at the very top. So that's really that. It just tells you that there's that pressure of raising revenue, which does not align with maybe the policy around attracting investment and growing the economy, creating jobs, ensuring that the cake is bigger, and the treasury keeps on repeating the same mistakes and expecting different results.
A tax on macroeconomic, this royalty that has been increased to 10%. Your view, and also the minerals. I think now we're looking at 10% royalty as well.
Correct. So I think Ziwa covered it very well, but I think the catch is that the Minister of Finance recognizes that the price of gold per ounce is now over $4,000, and our production of gold is now exceeding 45 tons annually. So he's seeing money, 10% of that in value. He thinks he can close his gaps, but he will not be able to run away with the matter because the Korokosas, and I like there was angle that the corporate world, also the big players who also go informal. So I'm missing the point, and it actually addresses again your issue to say, does it grow the economy? It doesn't grow the economy. I'm worried that this budget is clear evidence that there's no listening to each other, because if he was talking to the mining sector,
it would have told him.
Yeah. And he would have avoided this possibility now of losing money. So the other area which you've talked about, which is very interesting, is 10% also export taxes for lithium, chrome, it's a whole range of items. Remember, we are a dollarized economy, and is increasing the cost of doing business, particularly on export competitiveness. It's increasing 10% in a period where the global price of base metals are subdued. You are aware that the companies in the platinum sector are retrenched because of the difficulties related to subdued prices in the global market, where China is the biggest consumer of base metal globally. And the geopolitics, as well as the tariff wars with America, has a negative dent on the global commodity prices. Now, the minister, ironically, recognizes in his budget that the prices will remain subdued. Actually, he put a table which shows a sustained decline up to 2026. But instead of him putting a remedy of fostering competitiveness by lowering taxes, he's increasing taxes. So that's where I have a challenge in terms of the rationale on how these taxes are being done. My submission, maybe as I round up, is that the Ministry of Finance team in particular must always exercise what we call impact assessment, or a regulatory impact assessment, or a policy impact assessment. It's very important because that will give them a granular information of the impact of these policies. I don't think they do that, because if they were doing that...
Certainly they do. They do need impact assessment. I'm being told that we've run out of time. Perhaps we need a part two to this to really bring it to its natural conclusion, because we haven't even gone down to, so what should business and what should we do as individuals? And I think that could be our part two, where we really focus on that. But to round up, maybe what we can do is we can start with you, Zia, to just say, so when you read through this budget, what can business do? Just, give us some sort of snippets, which we can then continue in part two of our conversation.
Well, I think for businesses is, they are facing a situation where more taxes are going to be extracted from them, and even more high regulatory risk, because obviously with that desperation, you're most assured that SIMRA will be coming after you hard and looking for whatever that they can.
So you're saying regulatory risk is your number one risk going into 2026?
Exactly. That's the number one risk. And also they need to also anticipate that the informalization is going to deepen going into 2026. The informal sector, they are looking at all these taxes and they would find ways of ensuring that definitely they are not as affected. So if you are a business, you want to find ways of ensuring that you've got access to, you are selling directly to these people and earning cash from it. because
And you're not banking the cash.
wow.
Okay, that was just.
We can't be advising them. They're big boys and big girls.
They know what to
They
do.
know what to do.
Prof, your last words, just to give us a snippet of what to then look forward to in part 2. So just give us your roundup. When you look at this budget, what should businesses anticipate and what should they do? Because that's our primary audience.
Okay, so the starting point is that business must brace for serious challenges 2026, particularly for me, inflation in the US dollar is a big issue.
Yeah, it's remained stubborn
Yeah.
at 13%.
13%. Now with these additional taxes, and we expect it to continue to go up. And I advise over 60 companies when they do their strategy retreats. And I must say, a lion's share of the companies I've talked to, I would ask them a question to say, how are you incorporating inflation in US dollar in your strategy? And in number of instances, people were actually questioning me, what are you talking about? It's something which actually slipped. I noticed that it's a silent killer. When they do their budgets and say, okay, fine, your assumptions weighs inflation in these numbers, they don't have it. They're worried about Zig inflation. And Zig inflation is falling down because it's a shelf currency. It's now in the shelf. No one is worried about it, so it's curing itself. So they have to look out for inflation. The market will continue to become smaller. They spoke it on in terms of the informal sector, but the formal market will remain smaller. Now, my view, we can't keep business as usual. Now, for business associations such as CZI, Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Mines, my view, they need to come together as a consortium and come up with a paper to engage government on the possible implication of this. You can't let these things go in, year out, and you're watching. It's like you are a duck which is seeing children being taken by an eagle and say, mwanaenda, mwanaenda. And that's how they are going. They are closing. So if they don't engage government on a pragmatic approach and an evidence-based approach, the challenge with businesses, particularly the business association, they have silo mentality. They are competing for relevance. This is the time they must unite and say, this is our collective view as a business. Because if we allow this budget to be passed the way it is being done now, you have Chamber of Mines, they are going to be closing companies. You have industry, you have bankers association. No one is going to be putting money in that bank. Whether you are in an NGO or not in Zimbabwe, you won't put money in that bank because of these measures. So we need to engage government in a pragmatic way, and the government must be open-minded that we are building this country together. What we need, colleagues, is a functioning economy. We are not there to outdo each other, but where we've come now at this stage, we need proper dialogue, evidence-based dialogue, and we need to come up with a way forward. This budget, if I was Parliament, and if the business has to do the paper soon before the budget is passed, and then we correct these things before it is too late.
Well, that's a very good reason for us to actually have a part 2, and which would really be targeting Parliament so that before this budget is passed, that we give concrete advice on what can be changed and how to go about the change. To our listeners and to everybody, please continue sharing. Please continue subscribing and liking and comment. Please always put your thoughts and comments. Disagree with us if you must. That's how we all learn, and that's how we actually make the analysis better for everybody. Otherwise, have yourself a wonderful Friday and weekend, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.